And then I will recite one verse dedicated to Lord Shiva, because it is Shivaratri today, the night of Shiva. This verse, because it's always better to know the meaning a little bit of what we are reciting. This verse comes from a hymn composed by sage Shankaracharya in the 8th century. The hymn is about worshipping Lord Shiva in meditation without any external instruments, tools, external objects such as flower or all the things that one sees in a temple, but to do the worship within oneself. And then the culminating verse of that hymn is the one that I will be reciting. And it is beautiful because it makes us aware that every form of worship or everything that came into existence in India as part of the cultural development is simply a pointer, a reminder to what we have been talking about in our previous class, what we'll be talking about in this class, just so that we develop the awareness. And not only a momentary awareness, but an awareness which saturates, permeates every aspect of our life. So the verse means that, O Shiva, within me you are present in the form of this consciousness within the body. Parvati, his consort, is present within me as the intellect which creates this world of diversity, this world of multiplicity. So that energy which creates duality in the non-dual essence, that is present within me as the intellect, which includes the mind and also the sense of I, the sense of ego, because they all exist within buddhi, within this faculty of perception itself. And then your companions are these senses through which I experience the world. Directly, the 5 senses of perception, and indirectly, the 5 organs of action. Atma tvam girijamati sahajaraha pranaha. And then this temple, this body, this human body is your temple because you reside in this. Shariram griham. And whatever I take in through my senses and ultimately offer it to consciousness, because that's what the Sanskrit word for senses in fact means. The Sanskrit word for senses is indriya. That's the word that we use in Sanskrit language. And indra means consciousness within, and the instruments that take information from the external world and present it as if like a gift to the consciousness within. Such instruments, such tools, they are referred to as indriya. So they are your companions, and everything that I take in through them is ultimately a form of worship, because there we offer something to the divine. With this awareness, everything that we take in becomes an offering to the divine present within. Whether we are eating something, whether we are looking at something, listening to the music, or whatever we are doing becomes an offering to the divine present within the heart. Pujate vishayopabhoga rajana nidra samadhi sthitihi. And even when I fall asleep at night, I look upon it as the deep state of meditation when a person does this with awareness. Yadyat karma karumi tattadakhilam. Therefore, whatever work, every action that I perform on a physical level, on a verbal level, and even on a mental level, all that is an offering to you. When I walk, it is like circumambulation around the temple. And like this, everything that I do is just an offering to the divine, to the omnipresent divinity. And because it is omnipresent, it is also present within myself. So this is the last verse of Shankaracharya's hymn dedicated to Lord Shiva, of the hymn of internal worship, the hymn of inner worship. So after a few moments of silence, I will recite this one, and then we will recite the mantras, and then we will continue with the Shanti mantra that we started studying in our previous session. आत्मा त्वं गिरिजामतिः सहचराः प्राणाः शरीरं गृहं पूजाते विषयोपभोगरचना निद्रासमाधिस्थितिः सञ्चारः पदयोः प्रदक्षिणविधिः स्तोत्राणि सर्वा गिरो यद्यत् कर्म करोमि तत्तदखिलं शम्भो तवाराधनम्। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। ॐ शन्नो मित्रः शं वरुणः शन्नो भवत्वर्यमा शन्न इन्द्रो बृहस्पतिः शन्नो विष्णुरुक्रमः। नमो ब्रह्मणे नमस्ते वायो त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्मासि त्वामेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्म वदिष्यामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु मामवतु वक्तारम्। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्तिः Shanti, Shanti. Om Yaschandasam Rishabho Vishwarupaha Chandobhyodhyamritat Sambabhuva Samendro Medhaya Sprinotu Amritasya Devadharano Bhuyasam Shariram Me Vicharshanam Jihva Me Madhumattama Karnabhyam Bhuri Vishruvam Brahmanaha Koshosi Medhaya Pihitaha Shrutam Me Gopaya Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Aham Vrikshasya Reriva Kirtih Prishtham Giririva Urdhva Pavitro Vajiniva Swamritamasmi Dravinam Savarchasam Sumedha Amritokshitaha Iti Trishankor Vedanuvachanam. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So this Shanti mantra, the fifth one, it presents really the essence of all the teachings found in the Upanishads in the least possible words, concisely, briefly. Further condensation can only be done through the one letter Om. That is just the next possible degree of condensation and brief expression. And that's why after this verse, when it is finished, the first word that comes is Om. Whatever has been condensed in Purnamadah Purnamidam, in this Shanti mantra, has been condensed even further in the word, in one letter, Om. So these are like sutras, the origin of the idea of sutra. The teachings of sage Patanjali, they are referred to as sutra. This concept of sutra came quite later as a standalone text. It comes later. We already find sutras to express something in brief, in condensed form. We already find such sutras in the Vedas, in the Upanishads themselves. It was only then later that complex philosophical ideas were then only presented in the form of the sutras, such as the sutras of sage Patanjali, which are referred to as the aphorisms of sage Patanjali. But the concept already exists in the ancient collection of teachings in the Vedas itself. So this Purnamadaha in itself is often referred to as a sutra because it is a condensed expression. And it is very much, you can also see that it is very much like a rosary. Each time the word Purna comes, but the word Purna is not the beads. The beads are the other words. Purna is like the thread which threads everything together and which is visible, slightly visible after every bead on a rosary. The same word, that is why. So it very much looks like a mala, looks very much like a rosary. And Om Kam Brahma, the last which has not been included here, would be very much like this, this Sumeru, the last. Because what Om Kam Brahma does, if somebody did not grasp the essence of silence through listening to Om Purnamada Purnamidam, then Om will inevitably end in silence. And when we understand Om, we come to know that these three letters, the greatest importance that these three letters have is that they make us aware of the silence which inevitably follows the pronunciation of Om after our lips have been closed. That is what is being pointed at ultimately by the monosyllable Om. And even if somebody doesn't grasp that, then the masters continue to say, space is Brahman. The space which follows after the pronunciation of Om, that space is Brahman. Isn't it that we use the word space also for silence? Do we use it in English language?
Well, we can say, give me some space, and usually it means stop talking to me, stop interacting with me.
Think a little bit harder. You are reaching to the point, but just a step further. What's the longest bar on a keypad called? On every computer keyboard, on your smartphone, on your iPad, the longest bar, the longest key, it is the biggest key. And it doesn't write anything. The most amazing thing is that the one that writes nothing, that is the biggest and the most important key on the keyboard. If the ancient yogis of India would have had access to today's keyboards, they would have said, oh, this is the most wonderful symbol to become enlightened. Because this is what everybody spends most of their time with, typing on their smartphones. But how many people become aware of that space, the biggest keyboard there? That's the amazing thing. And it is, in fact, not only the biggest keyboard, precisely it is the biggest key because it is the most used key. That is why. There are, I think they have done some research and they have found that the three most used keys, number 3 is backspace, human tendency to make errors, So we always have to unwrite what we have written. We have to destroy what we have written to write something new. Then the second most used key is E, which is sometimes pronounced but mostly silent in English language. Particularly in English language at least. And then the most used key is the space key. That is the single most used key of all the keys. And it doesn't write anything. So, the essence of the Vedantic teachings has been presented through this mantra. So now last time I did not explain it, I did not translate it. So let's do that this time. The core idea of this mantra, which is Purna, because it repeatedly occurs in the mantra itself, that I already explained in my previous session. Purna as complete, but explained as the infinite, the endless, where there is no end. That which has no limit, there is no limit. So adaha means that. Adaha in English can be translated as that, but there are very specific properties of this Sanskrit word in Sanskrit grammar, that it is in Sanskrit, because this is a pronoun, like that. Is that a pronoun in English language? Similarly, adas is also a pronoun, but the Sanskrit word for pronoun is a beautiful word. It means, pronoun in Sanskrit means that which can be the name of everybody. Because like I, anybody, that which has everything as its referent. That is the Sanskrit word for pronoun. If I say pen, then only the pen can be a referent. If I say wall, then only a wall. I cannot use the word wall for the tree. I cannot use the word tree for water. So they have individual reference. But pronouns are beautiful because you can use them to refer to everything. Also, a tree can be that, a river can be that, a mountain can be that, everything can be that, everything can be this, everyone can be I, everyone can be you, everyone can be he and she. In Sanskrit, there is no distinction. Except when you start declining it, then the distinctions come. The origin does not have it. The original root word for he and she, even in English language, he is present in both. Just an S has to be added and then he becomes she, that's all. So she is a little bit more than just he. The tiny little he. So that is what Sarvanama in Sanskrit means. When we use the Sanskrit word for pronoun, is that which can be the name of everybody, everything. And that is why this adas, because it is Sarvanama, it is the name of all, it refers to everything. And then also the essence of everything. Now the difference between that and this is we use the word that for something that is far away and this for something that is close by. So something that is beyond our perception, something that lies beyond our range of sight, something that is invisible, something that escapes observation. That is what we can refer to by the word that. So that essential nature which is omnipresent out there but cannot be experienced directly through the senses because the senses only perceive the momentary fluctuations, they don't perceive the essence, they don't perceive the foundational principle. And that's why it remains beyond sight. Also, again in Sanskrit grammar, adas is a name of all which refers to something that is beyond the range of sight. This is a very grammatical description of the word adas. And that's why it is referring to that essence. See, consciousness within us, consciousness within this body is the most immediately present entity. Even our thoughts, our perceptions, our feelings, they arise to it. But that is what we are. That is the closest essence of our being, consciousness. And we don't need anything else to become aware of it. It is directly perceptible. The more we meditate on consciousness, to become aware of ourselves, we don't rely on something else. To become aware of something out there, we rely on our senses. But to become aware of the perceiver, we don't rely on something that is being perceived, but the perceiver is completely self-reliant, like a light which enlightens everything else as well as itself. This light of consciousness also enlightens everything and itself. That is why it is called self-effulgent, like light, self-radiant. It enlightens everything else as well as oneself. To some extent, what Descartes said, to some extent. And the same idea also is expressed in the Bhagavad Gita, that one doesn't need any tool of perception to become aware of awareness itself, of the perceiver itself. We are reliant to perceive something, an object, but not the subject. So, consciousness within ourselves, from a first person's perspective, is completely direct, is the closest essence of our being. But from the third person's perspective, it is most elusive. We have no access to it from a third person's perspective. All I can do is just hope and infer that everyone sitting in this room is fully conscious like myself, based on the way you react, based on the way you talk. I can only infer, but I will have never direct access to the consciousness within you the way I have to consciousness within myself. So even though consciousness is present everywhere, it is not hard to infer that. It is not hard to believe that, because it would be very egocentric to think that simply because I can experience consciousness only within myself, I would be to infer that I'm the only conscious being in this world and everybody else is unconscious. That would be a mistake to infer that. And that's why consciousness is present everywhere, but out there it is paroksha. It is beyond the range of our senses, but within ourselves it is also beyond the range of our senses, because it lies at the very source of all those senses through which perception is taking place, as the very perceiver, as the very seer, what Patanjali refers to as the seer versus the seen. So, consciousness out there is Purna, which means infinite, which means that it is omnipresent like space. It is continuous because it is so subtle that it cannot be divided, it cannot be cut into pieces. It is not made of parts. It is not made of particles. Something that is made of particles can be broken into further pieces, but that which is not made of particles, how can that be further divided into pieces? The nature of consciousness is such that since it is not made of particles, it cannot be divided further into pieces. It is an undivided entity, and it is therefore free from any limitation. That is what we will see also in the other part of the mantra. Purnamadah, that is infinite, and then also this consciousness within myself, which seems to be limited by the body, by the senses, by the mind, and most importantly by this limited sense of I, created by the mind, this ego, which is something that has been created by the mind, with that a sense of limitation comes into it, fine, but in essence, it is still the same limitless essence. Even though it seems limited, in reality, it is not. In reality, even within the body, within here, it is Purna, it is infinite, it is limitless. That and this are the same, are one. This is the constant theme of all the Vedantic teachings, all the Upanishadic teachings. That's what yoga is about, because yoga means union, oneness. It's not something that is acquired through the practice of yoga. It is something that one becomes aware of. There is a difference between acquiring something and between becoming aware of something. We acquire something what we don't have, and we become aware of something which we always had, but we simply didn't know that we have had it all the time. We acquire a chain, a golden chain, from the goldsmith's shop, but we become aware of it when it is there in our neck, but we have forgotten that it was there and we were searching for it everywhere. That is the difference between awareness and between acquiring. That's why, often when people come to spirituality, the goal of my life is to acquire moksha, is to acquire freedom. Already the expression itself, and they come across as if they are highly spiritual being, seeking only after moksha and not desirous of anything else. That's sort of the air that they give, when they say that. But the statement in itself is rooted in misconception, because they are looking for something that they don't already have. What is acquired only is just the awareness of its presence. So then comes the next part. So that is infinite, and this consciousness within my body, this too ultimately is infinite, because the infinite arises from the infinite. Now, this is something that has to be understood. The infinite arises from the infinite. An effect arises from a cause. And so what arises seems different from the cause, but what the master is trying to point out here is that the effect which is arising is only seemingly finite. In essence, it is the same infinite essence which it was as the cause. So the idea is that nothing really changes radically. And that is where the Vedantic philosophers differ radically from all other Indian philosophers. Because all other Indian philosophers believe in radical transformation. When they speak of cause and effect, they always speak in terms of radical transformation. And what do we mean by radical transformation? The way you can picture it is that milk becomes curd. It loses its properties, its sweetness, its thinness, and it becomes completely something different. The idea of cause and effect in the understanding of Vedanta is not of that type. In the understanding of Vedanta, it is more seeming illusory transformation, such as when a person enters a room which is half lit and sees a piece of rope and then thinks that this rope is a snake and shouts and runs out. So where did that snake come from? It came from that rope. So the rope is its cause. But did anything really change in that rope? Did it really become the snake? It only appeared to the senses, to the perceiver as the snake. But in reality, nothing has changed. So the difference in these two examples, in one view, there is radical transformation, such as between milk and curd, where something radically transforms. And in the example of this snake and rope, it doesn't radically change. The essence remains the same. The substratum always remains the same. So in the same way, what the masters say, that if, for example, if you look at an earthen pot, it's just the name and form which has changed. Ultimately, it was just a ball of soil which transformed into all these different shapes. And even in that moment when that transformation has taken place, that soil is still present. The earthen pots originated in the soil. The soil is present if you just would become aware of it. And then that form, after it breaks, it again enters back into the same earthen soil. So in the same way, what the masters are trying to say, that in this whole process of transformation, deep down within oneself, that infinite essence does not get radically changed in the sense, what will be the radical change of an infinite? It will be to become finite. That is the radical change. So they negate radical change in the sense that deep down that infinite essence does not transform into something finite by losing its infinite nature, but deep down retains that infinite nature, even in the moments when it seems finite. And it is this awareness that here and now, in this very moment, that infinite essence, despite all the finite parts of our being, the body, the senses, the mind, the intellect, the ego, all these memories, everything that defines our individuality, despite all this transformation that has taken place, deep down within that, if one would look, if one would go deep enough, then the masters say that one can become aware of that infinite essence here and now in this very moment. And it is that awareness towards which this mantra is leading. So, Purnat Purnamudachyate, even what seems to arise out of the infinite and therefore seems finite, in fact retains that infinite essence within itself. And I think mathematics really beautifully, even the space between the numbers, they are infinite on both sides. From 0 to infinite on this side, go into the minus, into the opposite side, it's infinite there. And it's not only infinite in both directions, even between two numbers, there is this infinity. So even between these two numbers, there is this infinity. So in the same way, the masters, they are making us aware of the infinity that is present within what seems to be finite. This finite body, this finite mind, this finite ego. Purnasya Purnamadaya. Now that is the statement, half of the mantra, because this was half of the mantra. Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate. This is their experience of the infinite in meditation. Now how can we, their listeners, acquire the same state of meditation? The second part is about that. The first part is about their own experience, and that is always what the masters do. They start speaking from their own experience and then come down to our level so that they can raise us up to their own level. That is what we find in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Otherwise, why does Patanjali start with Samadhi, with the highest states of meditation in the first chapter, and then speaks about the means and the instruments and the sadhana and the practices, the practical path in the second chapter? The practical path always comes later. The goal is always expressed in the very beginning, because they start talking from their own level of experience, then they come down to our level of understanding, and then ultimately they go back to their own. This is the pattern that we find in the Upanishads. This is the pattern that we find in the Bhagavad Gita. This is the pattern that we find in the Yoga Sutras. Everywhere we find the same pattern. So now he comes on our level, that to become aware of that infinite which is present within ourselves, one has to grasp the infinite within the infinite here. And what does the grasping of the infinite mean is to transcend, to go beyond that which is finite, to transcend the physical body, to transcend the senses, to transcend the mind, to transcend the intellect, to transcend the seat of memory, and ultimately even to transcend the ego, and to get hold of the consciousness which is present within each one of them. That is grasping. To transcend everything that is being witnessed and to grasp the witness. That is what Patanjali would call, when the ultimate goal of yoga is when the seer is seated in its essential nature. Tadadrashtu swarupe avasthanam, in the third sutra, when it is no more influenced by anything that it sees, by anything that it perceives. That is what grasping. So now, in this grasping the infinite from the infinite, taking the infinite from the infinite by cleansing it from the finite, and that is where the whole path of yoga finds its place, because the path of yoga is the path of inner cleansing. Transcending, to help one's awareness transcend what is finite, what is finite, and to become aware of what is infinite. So purnasya purnam adaya, and then what remains ultimately is the infinite alone remains. That is again, now this next part is really points out what is the pinnacle for Patanjali's. So again, beautifully, the whole Yoga Sutras can be seen as a detailed explanation of this mantra. The first part of this mantra is the experience of the master. The third part, Purnasya Purnamadaya, encompasses the whole path of yoga in it, and Purnameva Vashishyate, that which remains, the infinite alone remains, the finite vanishes from one's awareness, and the infinite alone remains. This is the last state of Patanjali's deepest stages of meditation, which he refers to as non-object conscious meditation, asamprajnata samadhi, or another term which is more well known today and more frequently used in yoga literature, nirbija samadhi, seedless meditation, in which there is no seed, no prop, no object anymore, no object of perception, nothing perceived remains, just the pure perceiver in its essential nature. That is called nirbija samadhi. How does one perceive that, the masters would say that it cannot be perceived through the external eye, but to the external eyes, but it can be perceived and experienced through the inner eye of understanding. That is what they refer to sometimes as the third eye. In the case of Lord Shiva, in the image, it is pictured as the third eye up here. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is referred to as the Divya Chakshu in the 11th chapter, as the radiant inner eye. And in the Upanishads, it is referred to as the eye of understanding, Dhyana Chakshu, the eye of knowledge, the eye of wisdom. And this all can be explained by a very beautiful and a simple example. A picture. Has everybody seen a picture? Picture. Not a picture, but a pitcher. Pot. Yes. Pitcher. Earthen pot. It is very common in India. We use it at homes because it keeps the water cold. Because it constantly evaporates, and that's the reason we have chosen that as an example, because even though that means that the pitcher, that covering, that earthen pot, even though there seems to be a wall around water, that wall is porous, but porous not for water, but for wind. So the wind can reach water, but water cannot flow out. See the point? The wind reaches the water, otherwise how does the water become cold? The wind cools down. If you put it into the wind, after 15-20 minutes, it will become completely cold. Even if you are in summer, every other water will become hot. But if you keep water in a pitcher, then even the summer hot heat wind cools it down. That is the amazing thing about it. Why? Because of evaporation. So the water evaporates and wind reaches it, but water cannot flow it out. So if wind can reach there, it is even easier to perceive that space is continuous. That limitation does not really limit the space within the pitcher and the infinite space around it. Seemingly to our eyes, it seems that it is being limited, and that's why the space, you would very easily say that the space within that pitcher is limited if you just rely on your eyes. You'll see, yes, the space is limited. It cannot do the work that the infinite space does. You cannot fly an aeroplane in it. But in essence, let's talk about the essence. In a sense, how is this space within the pitcher coming from the fact that when even wind can enter, then what about space? So space is continuous, and of course, today, thanks to our scientific understanding, we know that each and every atom in that earthen soil, in that the material of which the pitcher is made, that is mostly nothing but empty space. Because today scientists tell us that if you would remove all the space that is there in the atoms which has become this earth, the earth would shrink down to as big as an apple. So that is how much space there is. It will still be as heavy as the earth itself. So your apple will be as heavy as the earth, but it will be as small as the apple. That is what the scientists say. So that's how much space there is in the atom. So it's all space. So if we look at that space now, with this eye of understanding, is it difficult to understand that the space within the pot is also infinite from a higher perspective, seen from the perspective of space itself? Yes, from my limited perspective of the senses, it is limited. But seen from the perspective of space itself, it is the finite, seemingly finite space within the pitcher is as infinite as the space out there. And in India, we also use it. We use this pitcher also as a beautiful percussion instrument. Ghatam. Yes, it is referred to as Ghatam, South Indian music, and that's the most ancient, beautiful, yeah, that's the most ancient, just a simple pitcher made out of soil. You can also use it as a percussion instrument, a beautiful percussion instrument. Just the quality of the soil has to be beautiful, then beautiful sound comes out of it, really a metallic kind of beautiful sound comes out of it. So I really nearly wanted to bring my picture today down to this class and put it in front of us and point at it, that now see, here it is, just imagine it in front of me, and then Purnamadaha. Sorry. Purnamada, that infinite space out there is infinite. The Purnamidam, the space in this pot, is infinite. This infinite arises from that infinite. Grasp the infinite within this, and what remains is just the infinite. It is as simple as that. What this mantra is saying is as simple as that. Nothing complicated. It's just our understanding, our mind sometimes resists, because the mind itself is finite. The mind itself, it cannot comprehend. It's just incapable of. Because it is something that arises, it is something that has been created. In space it is finite, in time it is finite, and therefore how can it grasp the infinite? It's just impossible. It can become aware of it. Like if you have because the mind works very much like a mirror. The mirror can mirror infinity. If you remove everything else, what it will mirror is the nothing. And that nothing is infinite. Then it had started mirroring infinity. But it cannot mirror infinity in its infinite essence. It just can have a glimpse of it. That's all. That's all what the mind can do. It cannot grasp it, but it can experience it. But even the experience, it resists. And it is that resistance, it is that limitation, it is that, what's the English word for physical, which, the body makes us stiffness, yes. The opposite of flexible is stiffness. The mind is stiff. Like our body is stiff, the mind is also stiff. So like the stiffness and the more the body becomes stiff, also the mind becomes stiff. The whole path of yoga and Vedanta is to break this stiffness. First of all, on the level of the body, then on the level of prana, and on the level of the mind, so that it can get rid of that stiffness and can appreciate the beauty of the infinite, where there is no stiffness. Because resistance comes because of stiffness. The moment we feel some resistance, it means some stiffness has developed. So that is one example that the masters give. Sometimes another example that the masters give, and this example was developed by Sureshwaracharya. If you have seen pictures of Shankaracharya with his 4 disciples, Shankaracharya was this great master of the non-dualistic traditions of India who lived in the 8th century and has had tremendous influence. I would say that the past of India had 2 extremely influential figures. One was the Buddha and one was Shankaracharya. India did not remain the same after these two figures. The India which was there before the Buddha changed into something else. The India which was there before Shankaracharya once again changed into something else. And he's often depicted with his 4 disciples. Each one of them is a masterpiece, and a masterpiece of, how should I say, queerness in their own right. But one of them, the eldest one, who was also a great scholar, Sureshwaracharya, who is the elderly figure in all the 4, he was also a very, very great scholar, and initially a great opponent of Shankaracharya, but he had then won him over in his discussions. And he develops the idea here in his metered commentary, beautiful commentary, where, and the quintessence of that in this shloka is that you see, yes, the ocean is infinite, like the ocean of consciousness. Also the actual ocean that we see is infinite. It has no boundaries. It is beyond any perceivable boundary compared to the rivers, even to the biggest rivers. It has no boundary. But there are waves on its surface. And these waves, each one of these waves, have 3 parts. There is a crest. There is the crest part, which is the most active and the most violent part. The moment it reaches us, it really throws us back. So that's the most active and most violent part. It really, the most active, let's skip the word violent, just most active part. And then comes the trough. There is movement in the trough also, because it follows the crest. Do you get the difference between crest and trough? This is the crest, and this is the trough. So in the trough also there is movement, but not as clearly perceivable as there is in the trough. The force that hits, it hits more the crest. The crest has that force to hit. The trough just follows. So these are the 2 aspects of the wave. And then there is a third aspect, which is that aspect, the water aspect within the wave, which is the very source, which is the ocean. Because is the wave different from the ocean? It is just a momentary occurrence. Now, momentary occurrence, the word for momentary occurrence that he uses is very important, that it has to be noticed in Sanskrit so that we can make the connection between this and Patanjali's teachings. He uses the word vritti, already here. That these are just 3 different vrittis of the same ocean. One vritti is the violent and highly active crest. The second vritti is the less active trough. And the third vritti of the ocean is its infinite, peaceful nature. Go a little bit deeper under the wave. What you find is the completely infinite, peaceful ocean. And that's what happens when the wave comes. And if you just stand against it, it will throw you. But just bow down and go in it. It passes from above. Because then we get hold of that peaceful ocean which lies within the wave. So the same thing, he says, that the most active aspect of our being, which is the physical body, the most active, which I can feel as active and somebody else can also see as active, that is like the crest. Does it make sense? And then there is the subtle body. What is the subtle body? The subtle body are the energy that flows within the senses of perception, the energy that flows within the organs of action, the energy that flows through the mind and the intellect and the ego and the sense of memory, that energy aspect. And there, the action is not as clearly visible from a third person's perspective as it is. Yes, from within I feel my mind is active. From within I feel my senses of perception are active. From within I feel my intellect is active. Everything is working. From within I feel that. But from outside I cannot see you acting on that level. So it is more like that trough, where action is there, but we can't perceive it. And the third level, if a person goes deeper, first comes the crest, then comes the trough, and go deeper in that trough. The trough in itself has a depth. So the mind, the intellect, all of them have a depth. But go deeper into that depth. What you find is that peaceful, infinite ocean, which is that Purna, which is that consciousness, that level of pure consciousness, which underlies all these activities, even of the mind, even of the intellect, even of the senses of perception. That is what is being referred to as Purna. The point is, even in the very moment when the wave is perceivable, down there the ocean is present. It is just a matter of becoming aware of it. That's all. So this idea, with this I conclude, this idea of infinity and the awareness of infinity deep down, when the masters say that deep down to become aware of that infinity, this is, through various examples, they have tried to explain how to understand that. And that is why the idea of infinity is the idea of Purnatva. The idea, because Purna is not only infinite, but it is also complete, it is also full. It has that idea of fullness. And this has become such an important idea because whether one looks at the beginning of the eight-limbed path of yoga, whether one looks at the middle, or one looks at the last limbs of yoga, the idea of infinity is present there. One cannot cultivate, the masters say that one cannot cultivate santosha, contentment, without becoming aware of this Purna essence. So for the practice of santosha, for the practice of contentment, which is one of the niyamas, this notion of infinity is extremely important. And how does a person master an asana? There also Patanjali, in the context of asana, he speaks of two things. The second thing that he speaks of is by becoming aware of the infinite. So there also the idea of infinite has been pointed at by Patanjali. Patanjali himself is an incarnation of that infinite. Because isn't it that we refer to him as Ananta, endless? He's an incarnation of Ananta. So even in the mythological story, the essence of which he's an incarnation is Ananta, is that endless essence. So every story, every teaching ultimately is, the purpose of that is to be a finger towards the infinite which lies within, the infinite ocean which lies deep within the waves. That is what this mantra is about. And for this reason, this mantra has become so omnipresent in the Indian culture, particularly in places like Rishikesh, whether when we have our food, when we start a class, when we start a celebration, when we start a worship session, always we start mostly with this mantra. So just at the beginning, at least, that awareness of that infinite within oneself may come to the forefront, and then everything else becomes meaningful, becomes a tool, an instrument to retain that awareness. Only then everything else is meaningful. Otherwise, we have we have chosen to remain with the waves and to neglect the ocean, which is a sad thing. Both should be enjoyed, both should be perceived, both should be experienced. Also, the finite wave has its own beauty. Just look and sit at the shore of a sea, and the way these waves are coming forward and then going back. It is so beautiful. This constant movement in the infinite ocean is so beautiful. It has its own beauty. But to be lost just in the movement and to be negligent in the immovable essence, that would be akin to knowing only half of the truth. The other half of the truth remains hidden. That is what has to be perceived, and through that perception, yoga gives us a complete perception. It does not leave out half of the picture. But it's like, you see, I always like this metaphor of the moon. We always see just one side of the moon. Somehow the orientation is that we always see the same side of the moon, even though the moon is constantly turning and we are also turning, but still. And when for the first time a spacecraft actually went to the other side and took a picture of the moon from the other side, one of the great scientists, he said that this is a historical moment because for the first time humanity is seeing the moon from the other side. We always saw a complete picture of the moon has emerged. In the same way, we always just experience one side of our consciousness, the moon side. Never the no moon side, the other side which remains hidden. Because the moment that side comes in front, it's no moon, there is no light that shines on it, and that's why we don't see it. So yoga is that which makes us aware of both sides of the moon. So with this, I think the time is over. Still, if you have any questions, I will be here available. Please feel free. Any clarification about a particular word or anything, just let me know. I will be very happy. But I would like to finish this class so that I don't hold up everybody else, because the time is already quite, it has crossed the time limit. सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः, सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। Thank you very much for being with me. Thank you.